swear, I lift weights. This is just really heavy. These are all of my art books that I like using. I use all of these books for different reasons. I've used them for references, I've used them for resources, as well as just to get inspiration. Some of these books that are here are other artists that I really admire, and I wanted to just go over why I chose the books I did, how I use them, and how you could probably use them too if you're looking for a new way on how to use art books, or if you're kind of confused, or how do you even use it for reference material. Let's get into that. So this first one is one of my favorite artists. I adore their work. It's Ty Lee. They create just these beautiful paintings. They're acrylic paintings, and they just have such a gorgeous story with a lot of them. What they do is they'll usually have poetry either below their paintings, like in the description, or uh, at least in this book, they have them alongside. And it's such a beautiful way. So when I purchased this, also when I found this person originally, I was just drawn to the colors and just the way that they create such a fluid motion through the composition. It really feels like it's almost dreamlike and in like a state of kind of like an otherworldliness. And so I purchased this to see if I would be able to replicate that in my own work. And so I've pulled inspiration. If you've seen the painting by Panic, or if you've seen more of my recent paintings, a lot of them have like these more fluid objects and individuals in them, and it derives from this. Eventually, I think I would like to incorporate more colors the way that they have. But something else that I pulled from this, I remember reading some of their poetry and I was just in awe. And I had my travel sketchbook at the time. So it was one of my final sketchbooks that you would see in my sketchbook video. And you'll see that I had started to write poetry alongside some of my own work. And it was inspired by Ty Lee because I think that interweaving poetry into your paintings is such a beautiful idea. And honestly, I don't really see a lot of people doing that. And so they've really inspired that for me. Another book that I have is from an illustrator, um, Oliver Jeffers, Begin Again. And so this book, I purchased it when it came out. I got it from a local bookstore in Capitol Hill. And so I was drawn to the vibrancy, how vibrant this book is, first of all. And then secondly, the story itself is really gorgeous. I just loved all the texture that's in it, but the story is really beautiful. So it's the idea that like we can always start again. We don't have to create these boundaries between each other, because when it's an us versus them, there is no we and there is no love in that. And so stop creating divides between people, because we all are one and we can all start again. And so it was the idea of like throughout history, we've always started again. And I love and I cherish this. I've used this to kind of help guide me in trying to build more texture in my work, because sometimes my work can lay a little bit flat. And so I like to pull this out and see, oh, they added a lot of texture here in this part to help create depth and kind of change up the way it looks. And so I use that for this. Also, they inspired my color palette as of recently. Before, I didn't really stick to one color scheme, but the longer I've been painting, the more I tend to stick in the blues and pinks and purples. I think because it has such a endearing sediment to me, and like that being like my childhood bedroom was pink and purple growing up, and then it switched to blue and green. And so I really like using those colors a lot in my work because it gives kind of a nostalgic feeling to it. One of the first few art books that I had purchased for myself were Impressionists. And so this one specifically is a culmination of many Impressionists throughout the era. And so it goes into a lot of their work. So what I would use this book for is I would actually try to do a comparison study. And so I would try to paint the way that they did. And so if you see my sketchbook tour, I'll be referencing that quite a bit in this video. When I first got my first set of Posca pens, I tried to use this book for that. And so you'll see some of those small drawings are in reference to these, and also Monet's. So This is my Monet book that I got from an estate sale. And so Monet was kind of like one of the first few painters I remember learning about in school, them and Frida Kahlo. And so I picked up this book from an estate sale because I was like, well, I want to learn how to paint, and Monet is such a great painter. I want to understand what made him great and kind of try out painting for myself using some of the ways that he did. Like, for example, like I've done studies with like this painting and then a few others from this book. And I recommend that if you're ever trying to learn how to paint, I think that doing a one-to-one study of where you're painting alongside and you're pretty much copying it is a really great tool. Now, I don't recommend that you say like I take credit for this because like that's not your original work. It's a copy. It's really good for learning and building up that skill. So next up, Elegant Spirits by Yoshitaka Amano. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. This is a book on geisha and fairies. And so I was in Portland a few years ago at the largest bookstore there. And so I forget the name of it, but it's this really cool place, ginormous bookstore. They had this art book out on the table, and I was looking through it. And what drawn me to it first was the fact that it said fairies on it. I love fairies. I have two fairies in my cabinet. And so I was really drawn to the flowy nature. He has such beautiful flow through his paintings, and just also the details and how vibrant the paintings are. I just really love them. So like I wanted to learn how to paint this like very airy, dreamlike way of painting. And so I would use this as kind of like a one-to-one study, and then also just kind of composition, learning how to play with that. And it really encouraged me to go back to learning how to do gesture again. Yeah, I recommend this book. I love it. And of course, I have a Miyazaki book. When I very first started learning how to paint, I got this book because I was enamored by the background art in all of the films. And so what I would do is I would do a study of them, and then also sometimes what I like doing even now is I'll compare my work. So when I'm working on a painting, I'll check and see like are there any compositions in here that are similar to what I'm trying to paint? And this goes for all of my books that I'm showing you now, is if it's something that I'm drawn if I'm trying to draw or paint something that's similar in composition, I'll try and see if it's in one of my books, because then it kind of helps solidify how to draw it in a way. And so, what I like doing, like here, a lot of the paintings are just really beautiful. So, I've done studies, and then, yeah, also just the character design is so nice. Like, it has a lot of the original artwork, the loose sketches. I like to do ceramics in my free time. And so when I was at the ceramic store a few times ago, I was looking for books on folk art. And so I really love folk art because it kind of creates such a sweet essence to something. And so I really like to interweave that with my borders that I like making around my paintings. Most of my paintings tend to have a border around them if it's not a full illustration. And I like doing that just because it adds some more character to a painting. And so I wanted to find something that would have some sort of reference material in it. And so I found this one. And it's so good because it has some of the like original designs and motifs. Now, folk art is not just American. There are other cultures that have folk art as well. And so this was the one that was in my store. I would have chosen another book. I wish that there was like a culmination of many cultures, folk art, so that way you can see kind of the difference between cultures and how the motifs that they use. Um, but this book is wonderful. I'll pull this one out pretty often just to help me kind of understand, oh, so if I wanted to create a border that looks in a very certain way, this is a way that I could do it. So I'll usually take this book and I'll pair it with my natural history book from the Smithsonian. I thrifted this book and I was so happy that I did because I had been going to the library pretty frequently to go look at it and practice drawing with it. This book I tend to use more as reference material, so I'll sketch out what animals look like, how they're posed in here, and then also just different plants and animals, that sort of thing. I really like to challenge myself, so another fun thing I like doing with this is I'll randomly flip through the book and then I'll stop my hand on one of the pages and then point without looking at an animal. And then whatever animal I land on and then whatever plant I land on, I like to make a full illustration with. I've been doing that lately and I've created a couple of TikToks around that or Instagram reels. And so this book is great. I'm going to try and not show you this frog page is really nice. I landed on a bug page a moment ago, and I don't want to spook anybody who doesn't like bugs because I know I'm not a big bug person. But yeah, this is the Smithsonian book. I love this book. If I were on a desert island, this would be my desert island book. I would use this one, and I wouldn't even look at anything else because that's how much I love this. And I use this honestly every day when I'm sketching, when I'm trying to come up with ideas. I like to come here because sometimes you don't want to come up with something from your imagination. It's pretty hard to do that constantly. And so finding things that you like looking at from in here is great. All right. And then I mentioned Frida Kahlo earlier. I got this book from the Met a couple years ago, and I really love her work. I've seen her work in the DIA when I lived in Michigan, and that's where I grew up, by the way. Some little information about me. Grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Michigan, specifically in the suburbs of Detroit. And so I would go to the DIA every single year, multiple times a year. And I would love whenever there would be a Frida Kahlo exhibit. And sometimes I think some of her paintings are in the museum. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've been there, at least a few years. And so I love her work. The way that she uses symbolism and just the expressions. I don't do self portraits, but I do really love when other artists do them and then also incorporate other elements into it rather than it being just a static self portrait. It having like a background and then also animals or plants and just like a nice story with it. I love when there's kind of like a puzzle involved. Like, I don't necessarily fully immediately know what the symbolism behind like a panther is, but the more I look at the image and the more I kind of analyze what it looks like, the more I can kind of understand, oh, so maybe like this is kind of the storyline that she's going with. I love interpretation, and so I bring this into my own work. I've done studies with it where I'll paint a one-to-one with hers, or I'll try using some of her work, like composition wise, on things that are more like me just practicing and trying out. But something I really like to do that I've done in my own work is interweave some symbolism into it because I want it to be more than just a pretty picture to look at. I want it to be something that people have to kind of think about and it be a puzzle. I really love puzzles, so this is something I really enjoy. Okay. Finally, this is my last book. I got this from my family member, and they had this in their home library. It's Scottish Fairy Tales. I really love children's books. My dream is to be a children's book illustrator, and so I really love just like the smaller paintings that are in this all throughout. You have a lot of the story, and it's just so sweet. I just like this because I like trying to use the stories and then I like to try and make an illustration with them. This is also something I like practicing with this book and actually all of them. I like to use all of them for practice, to be honest. So that was my collection of all of my art books. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up or write a comment down below or subscribe. That's also cool. And let me know your thoughts. I'm always interested to hear what you guys think. And so, yeah, I will see you next week.